glad to have with us on our call this evening on behalf of the MCC Global Justice team and the members, and also on behalf of Reverend Elder Nancy Wilson, presiding elder moderator of Multiple Churches. We have with us Val Kalende, and Val is just finishing up the memorial service in New York for David Kato and the rally there in the vigil, and so we want to thank Val for being with us this evening. Val, I want to ask you to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about who you are in your work that you're doing, but let's just start by you telling us who you are to begin with.
Thank you for having me, Robert. My name is Val Kalende. I'm an LGBT rights activist in Uganda, but that's just a small percentage of who I am. Other than that, I'm a citizen of Uganda, and I've also worked as a journalist in the past years before I lost my job. And I've been doing activism for the last 8 years now. In 2003, we founded, my friends and I founded Freedom and Roam Uganda, which is now the only lesbian rights organization in Uganda. And the following year, in 2004, we formed Sexual Minorities Uganda, which is a coalition of LGBT groups in Uganda, and which is the organization David Kato has been working for. I'm also a Christian. I'm a Pentecostal Christian. And I was raised, in that tradition, and I'm still attached to the Pentecostal movement. And currently, I'm doing a master's in theological studies at the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay, great. Would you mind sharing with us some of your experience in Uganda before leaving, or before having to leave, actually?
I basically left Uganda the first time when I was coming to the United States. I was coming to attend a conference on women at the UN headquarters here in New York. And after that meeting, I went back to Uganda, and I came back around June for another conference, and that's how I got involved with EBS. But before I made that decision of leaving Uganda, of course, I was involved with my organization, Freedom and Roam Uganda. I was working as the communications and programs manager. But I've also been very involved in activities of community organizing and providing leadership for the LGBT community, and also using my experience in media to create more visibility of LGBT rights, and I've been a very strong advocate of the anti-homosexuality bill. I have a family which I'm not close to since I came out, so I really don't know much about my family right now. The LGBT community has become my family, and I've dedicated my time, my energy, and resources to building the movement.
What can you say, or what can you share with us about the LGBT movement in Uganda, and how did the framework and all of it begin to take place in Uganda while you were there, or even with David? Can you share with us what that movement is like in Uganda?
The movement in Uganda was not formed until about 8 years ago. Yes, there was a group of people, there was a group of lesbian women and gay men who had an interest in activism, but, there was no organized movement. It was some kind of community where people used to meet in bars and have a good drink and then go back home. So there wasn't really the activism that we have today. Now, the activism began out of growing concerns of lesbians, getting beaten, transgender people getting beaten in bars, and you would hear stories of lesbians, being beaten in schools. We actually lost a lesbian who was a student. The school authorities named and shamed her, and then a few days later she died. And out of these stories, I think the idea of activism, the idea of an organized movement that was also political, came up. And movement was basically formed by a group of young individuals. Most of us were students by then. We were still students. So the way we began organizing was, of course, meeting in these social places. We didn't have things like offices. We didn't have funders. We didn't have money. So our only safe spaces were these bars and restaurants where we used to meet, and that's how we began organizing. And the movement has actually been built by young activists. I think David Kato was the only out activist that was made in his 40s. Most of us, when we were just joining the movement, who were actually most of us were teenagers, and some of us were in our early 20s. But the movement in Uganda is a small group of courageous and brave individuals. There are very few of us who are out. I think we are about 6 open activists. But most of the people we work with are underground, basically because it's not easy to come out in Uganda. You really have to sacrifice a lot. And when you come out, of course, you lose your family, you lose your job, and you lose your sense of belonging. So most people are comfortable working in the closet and coming out, and we appreciate that. And then a few of us who can come out and speak out also provide leadership for the community. And we have organizations, several of them, working on different issues. My organization works with lesbian women. There are others who work with issues of HIV and AIDS. There are others who work with legal issues. So we've kind of divided ourselves because we know that we are a small community, and the fact that most LGBT people in Uganda actually never come out of their closet, so most of them are even afraid of approaching us. So we tend to specialize in issues such that each of us can handle a small piece of what we can handle, such that we can do it very well. And actually, most of us work underground in terms of our offices. We don't publicize them. We cannot register, which is also another obstacle to funding, because most funders require that you have to be a registered organization. So that's another obstacle. And we work in offices that we rent as our own houses, because we cannot have signposts and we cannot have physical addresses. So we work underground. But the most interesting thing about our movement is that we are very visible. I think that in less than 10 years, we've managed to bring up a movement that is visible, a movement that is progressive. I think that Uganda is one of those countries with the most progressive LGBT movement in Africa. Other than that, it's interesting that even with all these fears and worries that we have a group of young activists who are very courageous and who are willing to stand up and speak out.
What would you say the average age is for people involved in the movement right now? Because when you were here recently at the Sunshine Cathedral in Fort Lauderdale, there was a part of the presentation you were talking about the number of people as well as the age of people. What is the age of the movement right now?
Most of us are between the age of 18 and 30. When I look at our organizations, that's the range that we have, and we are careful not to work with LGBT people who are below the age of 18, and that is why we cannot go out in schools, because in Uganda we have a problem that our government thinks that we recruit children into homosexuality. So out there who are dealing with issues of coming out, it's difficult for us to go out and reach out to them, because we don't want to be implicated by the government that we are recruiting. Right. So even when it comes to membership, for example, of my organization, we are very clear and strict that we do not admit members who are below the age of 18. But the way we try to help those young people in schools is through our networks. We try to provide information on our website. We try to have listservs where we post information, and we make it clear that this information is actually going out to every LGBT person in the country. But it's still an obstacle that we cannot work around issues of homophobia in schools, because because we don't want to get into trouble with the government that we are working, in schools. So that is still a problem.
Okay. Can you share with us your understanding, your involvement with the current bill or the law in Uganda in respect to the LGBT community there?
Yes, the anti-homosexuality bill has been in our parliament for a year now. It was tabled in October of 2009. And the bill, we hope that it won't pass. But everything that is coming out of Parliament shows that the government is determined to pass it. Now, the anti-homosexuality bill, of course, the idea was partly made by the U.S. evangelicals when Scott Lively and a group of so-called ex-women came to Uganda, came to Kampala and held a conference there. And I've taken time to look at this. At the video of Scott Lively preaching in Uganda. I didn't attend the event. My friends did. I didn't. Mm-hmm. But every time I look at this video, actually, even with the death of David, I've been looking at this same video, and I can see where the anti-homosexuality bill came from. They preached a lot of hate, and they tried to portray LGBT people as enemies of Ugandans. And this is where the whole idea came from. And actually, when you look at the first draft of this bill, it resonated most of the things that Scott Lively had said. And the reason why this bill is very outrageous is because it talks about the death penalty of HIV and positive LGBT people. It talks about Uganda withdrawing from international conventions and treaties. And it also talks about promotion of homosexuality, which is interpreted as people who are funding LGBT rights, journalists who are writing about LGBT rights, and even our allies. So the bill spreads across, different areas, because it does not only affect LGBT people, it affects every Ugandan, and this is what has made this bill very famous. And we are hoping that this bill will not pass. We will have presidential elections in about 2 weeks. And our fear right now is that after the elections, this bill is going to be reintroduced in Parliament. But the other thing about this bill is that it was also tabled by a member of Parliament who has very close ties to a number of U.S. evangelicals and churches in the United States. And he's a young politician who is trying to make a name for himself. So this bill is actually sponsored by people who come from the church or who receive funding from the church, and also politicians who want to gain more power, who want to use this bill to spend more time in power. And that's why it's important that we speak out against this bill.
Can you say more about and I'll just kind of be direct with this question, about the American religious influence into Uganda in respect to this bill also?
I'm sorry?
Can you say more about the American religious influence in Uganda?
Yeah, because this is what people don't understand. I've talked to a few people who still think that U.S. evangelicals had nothing to do with this bill. But we are not saying, for example, I am not saying that U.S. evangelicals introduced homophobia in Uganda. We had homophobia even before they came to Uganda. But we are saying what we are saying is that they're actually sponsoring, they're actually fueling homophobia in Uganda by funding anti-gay pastors, by funding anti-gay movements and anti-gay churches. That contribution that they make, whether they know its impact or they don't know it, is actually affecting LGBT Ugandans. When a person like Scott Lively is given the freedom of meetings, of having a meeting with our members of parliament, that shows that, there is an underground movement that is working against LGBT people, and it's partly sponsored by some conservative Christians in the United States. And I think that is the role there. And if people understand that there is a direct relationship between funding a pastor who is anti-gay in a country which is highly homophobic, and how that has a very close relationship to the violence against LGBT people. I think if people understand that kind of relationship, then they will understand the role of youth evangelicals in spreading homophobia, not only in Uganda, but also in other countries like Nigeria.
Can you tell us, I want to kind of switch gears. I know you just left the vigil there in New York with a group there, but can you tell us a little bit about David and your experience of working with him before and after leaving Uganda, and what it was like to be with him? And I know that you two were kind of the co-founders of the LGBT movement in Uganda. So what was it like to work with David and the experience of him in the movement?
You know, it's still difficult for me to talk about David. You know, we've lost a very courageous activist, but my experience with David is about 8 years ago when we first met, and you know, we were a group of activists, and then Sexual Minorities Uganda was formed. And I remember that the very first day I met David, my first impression of him was that he was this guy in his late 30s, and he still had the passion and the courage to come out. You know, that struck me about him, because in Uganda, like I said, most of us who have been here for a long time doing this kind of work were young individuals and activists. But looking at a man in his late 30s with such passion, with such courage and bravery, you know, struck me. And that is one thing that brought me close to him. You know, he was a personal friend. He was a very fearless activist. He would go out of his way to run to prisons, to run to police stations, to get people out of jail. And he just stood in the way of everyone who he had to protect. And he was also someone who made so many friendships. Most of the connections we have, you know, around the world were started partly by David. And he always made sure that we were always well connected, that we were connected to people who can give us resources. And David was also a Christian. He started the other ship chapter in Uganda, and he also worked with Bishop Christopher Senyonjo, who is the only openly straight ally for LGBT people in Uganda. So he was that kind of guy, and his leadership will be greatly missed. I don't think that anyone can fit in his shoes right now. But we are trying to deal with this. We are trying to deal with the loss, and also to make sure that justice prevails.
What can you tell us about the state of the LGBT community in Uganda since his death? Are people, I would imagine people are hurting, or people are angry. What is it that's happening now to the community there that you can share with us?
It's one of those emotions. People, I've been spending a lot of time on the phone talking to my friends in Uganda, talking to activists and asking them about, you know, how they feel and checking in on them. And also asking some of them who talked to David, you know, just a few hours or a few days before he died. And they're all scared. There's a lot of fear in the community right now. They're worried because they don't know if the murder of David will actually lead to many more murders in Uganda. So whenever I talk to them, most of them are even scared of getting out of their houses. They're scared of going out to work. And I'm basically trying to organize psychological support for most of them to just go and see a counselor, because it's very tough on them. And but nonetheless, there has been massive reorganization of organizations, and especially SMAG, the organization David was working for. So we are trying to use his death as a way of stepping up action, because we have to mourn David, but we also have to celebrate his life. And one way of celebrating David's life is by moving on and by using this tragedy to bring about change in the movement. And I've tried to ask most of them about, how they feel about the recent investigation by the Ugandan police, and the fact that our government has actually eliminated homophobia from this case, and also the latest development of a man who has come out to confess that he actually killed David because David was making sexual advances on him. But most of us who are close to David know that he was scared. He lived his life in fear. His email was hacked 2 days before he was murdered, and another activist with whom they sued the Rolling Stone tabloid. Her house was attacked, I think, 1 day before David died. So all these incidences cannot be a coincidence. And right now we are demanding for a thorough investigation, into this. And we only hope that justice prevails. And my only opinion on this is that we won't give up on pushing our government to protect the rights of LGBT Ugandans, regardless of who they are.
Are authorities being cooperative at this point in helping to further move the investigation along?
I'm sorry?
Are the authorities at this point being helpful in working with the community?
I don't think that the Ugandan police. I don't think the Ugandan police have interviewed any LGBT activist.
Okay.
And I know that this was only expected. It was expected. In such cases where you have a high-profile individual, the government will not come out to say that this was a hate crime. So their only way of distancing themselves away from this was to say that it was an aggravated robbery. But we don't believe that, because we have evidence that David's life has been threatened since the Rolling Stone published pictures and actually put his picture on the front page. And there's a sequence of events that have been happening, to him and to several other activists, and we want to use that as evidence. I mean, when this guy who confessed to have killed him appears in court, we will present, our lawyers will work with the government to present all this evidence, such that we can have a thorough investigation into this and get justice out of it.
When you were here last week at the Sunshine Cathedral speaking at the speaker series, you made a statement in your presentation, and you said that if change was going to happen in Uganda, it would come through the church. Can you say more about that particular statement? Because when you made that statement, it almost sounded like an oxymoron to me. It's like the church is a part of the persecution, and at the same time, you have great hope in that if change is going to happen in Uganda, it will come through the church. Can you say more about that?
I say that basically because of my background as a Christian, and having grown up in a church that has been very oppressive, a church that has denied me the right to worship, the right to be a Christian. And sometimes I would just go to church on a Sunday, and the pastor, because he knows that he has seen a lesbian sitting in church, would just start preaching homophobic sermons. And I've actually been given my marching orders out of so many churches in Uganda. But the reason why I still have faith and hope in the church is basically because coming to the U.S. and seeing how faith groups and churches have actually worked so much to protect the rights of LGBT citizens, to protect the rights of LGBT people. I cannot wish any more than that for the LGBT community in Uganda. I know that there are two sides of religion. Religion can be oppressive, but religion can also be progressive. And I think that as the LGBT community in Uganda, we need to recognize the fact that not every religious leader, or not every Christian, or not every church is homophobic. It's really absurd that that's what the church in Uganda has made us to believe. And you will find that most LGBT people are running away from the church than going to the church. But I still have hope that from the very places where violence comes from, where oppression comes from, we can find spaces and places for dialogue and for change and for progress. So I believe in that, and I believe that our religious leaders actually just received an email from one of Uganda's anti-gay pastors. He sent me an email yesterday, which shocked me. This guy is actually saying that, he's grieved about David's death, and he's actually mourning with us. And he's actually saying that maybe one day we will be able to convince him. So when I read this statement, it surprised me coming from one of Uganda's anti-gay pastors for him to say that. I don't know if he means it, but in case he means it, then it means that, there's still room for change, and we have to recognize that, and we have to tap into that.
What is, what can we be doing here in the United States to help with the efforts there in Uganda? Is there anything that kind of comes to mind that might be concrete that we can be doing as we think about what you're going through in Uganda and what we're seeing in the papers? Is there anything that we here in the U.S. can help with efforts there?
Yeah, I know that President Barack Obama issued a statement celebrating David's life. But for me, I think that is not enough. We actually need the President of the United States of America to have a discussion with the Ugandan president to talk about the anti-homosexuality bill, because we need it out of our parliament. And the United States sends a lot of money, billions of dollars to Uganda in aid. And we are asking, what is the U.S. doing about a dictatorship in Uganda which does not respect the rights of its LGBT citizens? And what is the U.S. government doing about this? So I think that this politics of issuing statements, the politics of sympathy, it does not help us. For me, I call it help that does not help. Right now, we need action. We need to know what President Barack Obama is doing to convince our president to drop the anti-homosexuality bill. But we also need the churches here, the progressive churches here, to speak out against those who are exporting homophobia to Africa. And one of the ways that these progressive churches can help is actually to start thinking of maybe starting up. I would be happy to see an MCC church project in Uganda. We need people to start projects in Uganda, health projects, HIV and AIDS projects, orphanages, and that kind of thing, because we need resources. One of the things that David talked about everywhere he went was that we need resources. So I'm not going to stop talking about this and to stop asking for help, because right now my organization needs to find another building where we can maybe feel safer than where we are, and we need money, to be able to rent another building. So this is the kind of help that we are asking for, and we also need the American people to know that David no longer belongs to Uganda. David, I'm sure that you've seen the amount of response, to David's death. I think that David belongs to the world. He belongs to Africa. He belongs to the entire LGBT community around the world. So his death should actually remind us of the things we've been silent about, and the fact that we need to speak out against violence. Because David is not the first gay man to die in Uganda. There are several. But the reason why his death has attracted attention is that it has come at a time when we are speaking out against the anti-homosexuality bill. And he was also no ordinary Ugandan. He was a strong activist. So this is the time to start even thinking about other countries where such acts of violence are happening. Let us not focus on Uganda, but let us also focus on other African countries which are facing the same kind of problems.
Val, if there's one thing that you want people to take away from the night that are on this call, one thing that you want to leave with them, one thing that you want to remind them of, or one thing that you want to challenge them to do in addition to all the things that you just said, what would that one thing be that you want people to remember about this night on this call with you?
We have been speaking out, I think we've been singing the same song of LGBT, of US evangelicals coming to Uganda and preaching out against LGBT people. And it's now a year, I still cannot believe it that we've been saying the same thing for a year. And until David died, some people didn't even feel like getting out of their comfortable zones to take action. So for me, sometimes I take it that, how many more people have to die before people take action? So I think that the time is now. The time is now for people who feel that they are touched by this, people who feel that they should support us, to actually reach out to us and provide us with resources. Now, when I talk about resources, I'm talking about people who can give us technical support, people who can give us financial support. We need, like I said, we need progressive churches here to think about starting up projects in Uganda and to also encourage, their congregations here to speak out against the homophobia that is being spread in Africa. But one last thing that I would love for people to take, out of this conversation is that Uganda needs you, and we need your help. And without your help, many of us are going to end up like David. And it's up to you to reach out to us, and you can choose to support us in any way that you can. But this is no longer a struggle that we can handle on our own. We need extra hands, and I believe you will be able to do that for us.
Well, I want to thank you on behalf of the MCC Global Justice team tonight for being with us on this call and sharing your story. And I know that many people in MCC and probably others around the globe really do share and offer our condolences with you in the loss of David. And, I think as you said that, he no longer belongs to Uganda. He belongs to all of us, and it's a loss for all of us. And any loss at any time of someone of that nature or a loss to the struggle for human rights is a loss to all of us. And so our heart continues to go out to you and to our brothers and sisters in Uganda. And I'm sure that people would like to respond somehow. And I just want to say to those who are listening that if you wish to write to me at robert@sunshinecathedral.net, then I'll be able to correspond with Val and pass those needs and concerns on to her about how we can best support her as well as her brothers and sisters in Uganda, who are also our brothers and sisters in Uganda. So, Val, thank you once again. You are always in our prayers. And again, we support you. And thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.